On the other side of the galaxy, the message from the gentle current had reached its intended targets. The signal arrived at Serenitatis Prime, a beautiful world covered in peaceful cities that looked more like gardens than buildings. This was the home of the Galactic Peaceful Alliance, where all the civilized species came together to talk and share knowledge. The emergency meeting hall was filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. They all looked very different from each other, but they all shared one thing in common. None of them had ever hurt another living being in their entire lives. Ambassador Catherine stood at the center of the hall. She belonged to the Mollusk Collective, and her soft body was covered in beautiful patterns that changed color as she spoke. Her species had evolved in calm seas, where the biggest danger was a strong current. They had never needed to fight for anything. "Friends, we have received a terrible message," Catherine said, her voice like water flowing over smooth stones. "Our dear neighbors, the Zephyrians, are in great danger. Their ship is broken, and they are dying." A wave of sadness moved through the hall. The different species showed their feelings in different ways. The avians sang low, mournful notes. The crystal people dimmed their inner light. The tree shepherds let their leaves droop with sorrow. Commander Softwing of the Avian Federation flew to the speaking platform. His feathers were the color of sunrise, and when he moved, he seemed to dance through the air. His people had learned to fly by riding gentle winds, never needing to escape from predators because their world had none. "How much time do they have?" Softwing asked, his voice making musical sounds. "Our scientists say their air will last perhaps 3 more days," replied Dr. Harmony, a crystal person whose body was made of living gemstones. Her species had grown in peaceful caves, spending thousands of years thinking deep thoughts and creating beautiful art. "But that is only if they do not move around too much." The hall fell silent. 3 days seemed like a long time, but everyone knew the truth. The galaxy was huge, and spaceships were slow. The fastest rescue ship in the Alliance fleet would take at least 5 days to reach the Zephyrians. "What about the medical frigate Gentle Healing?" asked someone from the back of the hall. "It has the best doctors in the galaxy." "The Gentle Healing is 7 days away," Catherine said sadly, "and it can only travel at peaceful speeds. We designed our ships to be comfortable and safe, not fast." This was true. Every ship in the Alliance fleet was built with one goal in mind: to make space travel as peaceful and comfortable as possible. Their engines were quiet and smooth. Their hulls were made of materials that would never hurt anyone, even in an accident. Their weapons systems consisted of devices that could create pretty light shows or play soothing music. The idea of building a ship that could move fast enough to hurt someone was unthinkable to them. Elder Whisper in the Wind spoke next. She was one of the gas people, a species that looked like living clouds with gentle voices. Her people had evolved floating in the atmosphere of a peaceful gas giant, where the biggest excitement was a change in wind direction. "Perhaps we should contact some of the more aggressive species," she said, her cloudy form rippling with worry. Another wave of emotion moved through the hall, but this time it was fear. The Alliance knew that not all species in the galaxy were as peaceful as they were. There were rumors of races that actually competed with each other, and even stranger stories about beings that might raise their voices during an argument. "You mean the Kronak?" asked Dr. Harmony, her crystal body flickering with nervous light. The Kronak were considered the most warlike species that the Alliance had ever encountered. Once every few years, their young people would engage in something called ritual combat, which involved gently pushing each other until someone fell down. The winner would then help the loser stand up, and they would all share a meal together. To the Alliance, this level of aggression was almost unimaginable. "Or perhaps the Thunderhoof Coalition," suggested Commander Softwing. "They are said to have battle dances." The Thunderhoof Coalition was made up of large, 4-legged creatures. that settled disputes through elaborate dance competitions. The losing side would have to listen to the winners sing victory songs for an entire day. It was considered the height of savage behavior, but even these warrior races would take too long to reach the Zephyrians. Their ships were only slightly faster than Alliance vessels, and they were all at least 6 days away from the emergency. "What if we asked them to bring their fastest ships?" asked a young member of the Flower People. Catherine's patterns turned a sad purple color. "Their fastest ship is still too slow, and besides, exposing the gentle Zephyrians to warrior energy could damage their minds forever. You know how sensitive they are." This was also true. The Zephyrians were plant-based life forms who could sense the emotions of other beings. Being around even mildly aggressive creatures could make them sick. Some Zephyrians had been known to faint just from watching recordings of Kronak ritual combat. The meeting continued for hours, but no one could think of a solution. They tried calling every ship in the Alliance fleet, but none of them could reach the gentle current in time. They considered sending multiple ships to meet in the middle, but the mathematics didn't work out. They even thought about asking the Zephyrians to use escape pods, but their ship was too far from any planet. As the debate went on, the beings in the hall began to realize a terrible truth. For all their wisdom and kindness, for all their advanced technology and beautiful ships, they were helpless to save their friends. The galaxy was simply too big, and they had never built anything fast enough to cross it quickly. What none of them knew was that their understanding of the galaxy was incomplete. They had spent so long creating a perfect, peaceful civilization that they had never looked into the dark corners of space. They had never seen the systems marked with warning beacons, never explored the regions where their sensors showed only static and danger. They had no idea that there were worlds out there, so dangerous that they forged their inhabitants into something unthinkable, places where beings learned to move fast because slowness meant death, planets where creatures built machines for war because peace was a luxury they couldn't afford. The Alliance had spent millions of years categorizing every kind of world they could imagine. They had Class 1 Paradise worlds where nothing bad ever happened. They had Class 7 Challenge worlds where the weather might be slightly uncomfortable. They even had Class X Difficult worlds where a being might have to work hard to find food, but they had never encountered, never even imagined, something like a Class 3 Death world. As the meeting finally ended with no solution found, the Alliance members returned to their ships and homes with heavy hearts. They would send their fastest vessels anyway, hoping for a miracle, but they all knew the truth. The Zephyrians were going to die, and there was nothing anyone could do to save them. If only they had known that at that very moment, a ship was racing through space toward the gentle current. A ship built for war, carrying beings forged by a world that had tried to kill them every day of their evolution. A ship that would arrive in time. The alien ship floated dead in space. Its beautiful crystal walls were cracked and broken. Air leaked out into the empty darkness like tears from a dying creature. Inside the ship, Captain Veltar tried to stay calm, but his 4 arms shook as he worked the emergency controls. The ship was called Gentle Current, and it was nothing like the war machines that other species might build. It was made of living crystal that grew like a plant. Gardens filled most of the rooms with flowers and trees that cleaned the air and made food. The walls were clear so everyone could see the beautiful plants inside. It was a ship built by a people who had never known war. But now the Gentle Current was dying. "Captain, our air will not last much longer," said Mordan, the science officer. His skin was normally bright blue, but now it looked pale and sick. All Zephyrians changed color with their feelings, and right now everyone on the ship was showing the gray-blue of fear. Veltar looked at the damage reports on his screen. The accident had been nobody's fault. They had been studying a strange space cloud when something went wrong with their engines. Now they were stuck between star systems, too far from home for anyone to reach them in time. "Send out the emergency call," Veltar told his communications officer. Ask for help from any ship that can hear us." The young officer barely passed. Her first molting worked at the controls with nervous energy. "What should I say, Captain?" "Tell them we have 37 crew members. Tell them our air is running out. Tell them we need medical help." Veltar paused and looked around at his crew. Some of them were just children, sent on this peaceful research mission to learn about the galaxy. "Tell them we are dying." The message went out across space, carried by invisible waves that could travel faster than light. It was a simple message, in the language that all civilized species used to talk to each other. The ship's computer added the special emergency codes that every space traveler knew. "Help us," the message said. "Please help us." But the accident had damaged more than just their engines. The communications array was broken too, sending the signal in directions it was never meant to go. Instead of reaching only the nearby systems full of peaceful traders and explorers, the message shot out toward the dark edges of the galaxy where no civilized ship ever traveled. Far away, on a blue and green planet that no alien had ever seen, the message arrived at a place called Earth. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was drinking coffee in the communications room of the UES Leviathan when the computer started making noise. He put down his cup and looked at the screens. Strange symbols filled the display, followed by numbers that made his eyes go wide. "Holy cow," Jake said under his breath. He had been in the Space Navy for 10 years, and he had never seen anything like this. The UES Leviathan was not a ship built for peace. It was 2 miles long and covered in weapons. Its thick armor could stop bullets the size of cars. Its engines could push it faster than any ship humans had ever built before. It was designed to fight wars among the planets and moons of Earth's solar system. But right now, it was the only human ship close enough to help. Jake ran through the corridors toward the bridge, his boots making loud sounds on the metal floor. The ship was full of soldiers and weapons and machines built for war. But Jake was thinking about something else. He was thinking about the universal law that all space travelers followed. When someone calls for help, you help them. "Captain Rodriguez, we've got something," Jake said as he burst onto the bridge. Captain Lisa Rodriguez turned in her command chair. She was a small woman, but everyone on the ship knew she was tough as steel. She had fought in 3 wars and never lost a battle. Her dark eyes looked at Jake with the kind of attention that made people want to stand up straight. "What kind of something?" she asked. "A distress call, Captain, but not from any human ship." Jake handed her the data pad. "The computer says it's using universal emergency codes, but the language is completely unknown." Rodriguez looked at the information on the screen. The message was simple enough once the computer translated it. People were dying. They needed help. They were giving their location in space. "How far away?" Rodriguez asked. 18 hours at maximum speed," Jake replied. Rodriguez thought about this. 18 hours was fast for a trip between star systems, but it might not be fast enough. The message said the people were running out of air. Every minute they waited was a minute closer to death for the aliens who had sent the call. But there was another problem. Humans had never met aliens before. They had been looking for signs of other intelligent life for hundreds of years, but they had never found any. Now aliens were calling for help, and Earth's most powerful warship was the only thing that could save them. "Are there any other ships closer?" Rodriguez asked. Jake shook his head. "No, Captain. We're it." Rodriguez stood up and walked to the front of the bridge. Through the big windows, she could see the stars. Somewhere out there, people from another world were dying. It didn't matter that they were aliens. It didn't matter that this could start a war or cause problems that nobody could imagine. What mattered was that people needed help. "Set course for those coordinates," Rodriguez ordered. "Maximum burn. All crew to emergency stations." The bridge suddenly became very busy. Officers called out orders and checked their controls. The ship's computer announced that they were going to emergency speed. Down in the engine rooms, the massive machines that pushed the Leviathan through space began to work harder than they ever had before. The ship turned in space like a giant metal beast, then shot forward with a burst of light from its engines. It was heading toward a meeting that would change everything for both humans and aliens, but nobody on board knew that yet. Captain Rodriguez sat back in her chair and watched the stars. In 18 hours, they would find out if the aliens were friendly or dangerous. They would find out if humans could save lives across the galaxy, or if they were about to start the first interstellar war. But Rodriguez wasn't worried about war. She was thinking about the message they had received. Somewhere in the dark between the stars, people were dying, and the Leviathan was their only hope. 18 hours, she said quietly to herself. Hold on. We're coming. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and disappeared. Ahead of them waited the unknown and a meeting that would change the galaxy forever. 3 weeks after the invasion began, the Amazon rainforest had become a graveyard for the most feared army in the galaxy. Of the 2,000 elite warriors who had landed on Earth, fewer than 50 remained alive. They huddled inside their damaged landing craft, surrounded by a jungle that had learned to hate them with the passion of a living thing. Commander Vexahall sat in the corner of the ship's command center, his once proud scales now dull and scarred. His red eyes, which had once burned with the fire of conquest, now held only fear and confusion. Around him, the survivors of his army showed signs of something no warrior species had ever experienced. Complete psychological breakdown from fighting. An entire planet. The remaining Shardketh warriors had cracks running through their crystal bodies. The constant stress of Earth's attacks had weakened their molecular structure until they looked like broken glass held together by willpower alone. The few surviving void spawn flickered in and out of existence, their forms unstable after weeks of sensory overload. Even his own Krathos soldiers, bred for combat on the deadliest world in their sector, flinched at every sound from outside the ship. Status report, Vexhal croaked, his voice barely a whisper. All external sensors are non-functional, Commander, his science officer replied. The creature's multiple arms shook as it worked at a control panel that sparked and smoked from organic. Damage. The hull has been breached in 17 places, life support is failing, and the local ecosystem has surrounded us. Through the ship's failing view screen, they could see the jungle pressing against their vessel like a living wall. Vines had grown through the hull breaches, spreading inside the ship and wrapping around anything they could reach. The metal walls were covered in a green film of bacteria and fungi that ate through their advanced alloys like acid. Even the air inside the ship was becoming toxic as Earth's microorganisms invaded their life support systems. Outside, Jack Morrison and his team watched the alien ship slowly disappear under a blanket of vegetation. What had started as 5 human soldiers had grown into a network of fighters that included local tribes, environmental researchers, and even some Brazilian military units who had been quietly briefed on the situation. But the real army was the jungle itself. Amy Rodriguez had become something like a translator between human tactics and jungle warfare. She could read the forest's chemical signals well enough to know when predators were moving toward the alien ship. She could predict which plants would release toxins in response to alien technology. Most importantly, she had learned to communicate with the jungle's information network in ways that let her coordinate attacks across vast distances. The ship's power systems are failing, she reported from her observation post. The electromagnetic fields that kept the plants away are getting weaker every hour. Maria says the forest is getting ready for something big. Tony Blake had spent the last week learning chemistry from sources no military academy could teach. The jungle was full of natural compounds that could dissolve metal, short-circuit electronics, or create gases that were deadly to alien biology. He had turned the entire forest into a chemical weapons laboratory, and now he was ready to use what he had learned. I can trigger a reaction that will flood their ship with plant toxins, he told Jack over the radio. But we need to wait for the right moment. If they try to launch their escape pods, we want to make sure the air outside is unbreathable for them. Lisa Hayes had been studying the aliens' behavior for 3 weeks, and she had noticed something important. They were not just physically broken. They were mentally defeated. These creatures had spent their entire lives believing they were the ultimate predators in the universe. The idea that they could be hunted by beings they considered primitive had shattered their understanding of reality. They are not even trying to fight anymore, she observed. I have seen 3 of them just sit down and wait to die. They have given up completely. Danny Wright had been documenting the complete failure of alien technology in Earth's environment. Their weapons no longer functioned. Their armor had been eaten away by bacteria. Their communication systems had been overgrown by plants that used the metal components as structures for their root systems. The most advanced military equipment in the galaxy had been reduced to garden decorations. Their escape pods are the only thing still working, he reported. But even those are starting to show damage. If they wait much longer, they will not be able to leave at all. Maria Santos had been consulting with the oldest members of her tribe about what they were witnessing. The elders spoke of legends about times when the forest had protected itself from great threats, but none of them had ever seen anything like this. The jungle was not just defending itself. It was actively hunting an enemy that had never existed before. The forest remembers everything, she told the human fighters. Every chemical the aliens have released, every tree they have cut, every animal they have killed. It will never forget what they are. Even if some escape, they can never come back here. The jungle will know them. On the 20th day, the alien ship began its death sequence. Emergency systems activated as life support finally failed completely. The remaining survivors rushed to the escape pods, but they found that Earth had one final surprise waiting for them. The jungle had been patient, but it had not been idle. Root systems had grown around the escape pod launch tubes. Vines had wrapped around the pod casings. Most critically, the biological activity had created a chemical soup in the air around the ship that was toxic to every alien species present. When the first escape pod launched, it made it exactly 50 feet before plant toxins leaked through. The damaged seals. The crystalline shardketh inside dissolved into blue powder. The second pod failed to launch at all when vines tangled its engines. The third pod broke apart in mid-air when fungi had weakened its hull beyond the stress tolerance. Only 5 pods managed to escape the jungle, carrying the last survivors of an army that had never known defeat. Commander Vex Hall was in one of them, along with 2 Shardketh warriors, 1 Void Spawn, and a single Krathos soldier. They were suffering from malnutrition, infection, psychological trauma, and something no alien species had ever experienced. Absolute terror of an entire planet. The escape pods made it to orbit where emergency beacons activated automatically. But the rescue ship that eventually arrived found something that would change the galaxy forever. The survivors were not defeated soldiers. They were broken beings who had encountered something beyond their understanding. Jack Morrison watched. The pods disappear into the sky from his position in the trees. Around him, the jungle was already beginning to reclaim the alien crash sites. Vines covered the abandoned equipment. Trees grew through the metal ruins. In a few months, there would be no trace that beings from across the galaxy had ever tried to conquer Earth. Think they will come back? Amy asked. Jack shook his head. Not them, and if they are smart, they will make sure nobody else does either. He was right. Commander Vexhal's report to the Zephyrian Empire contained a single recommendation that became imperial law. This world was to be marked as forbidden territory. The humans were not just another species. They were something that should not exist according to galactic natural law. They were predators who had learned to make an entire planet their weapon. The 5 survivors spent the rest of their lives in imperial research facilities, their testimonies studied by scientists who refused. to believe their reports, but their warning was heeded. The coordinates of Earth were classified beyond the highest security levels, and the very existence of humans became the Empire's most closely guarded secret. Meanwhile, the Amazon rainforest returned to its normal rhythm of life and death. The trees grew taller. The animals resumed their ancient patterns of hunting and hiding. The rivers flowed clean again. But somewhere in the vast network of roots and chemical signals that connected every living thing in the jungle, there was a new memory. Earth had tasted alien blood and found it wanting. The planet was ready for the next challenge, and so were its children. Humanity had won their first interstellar war without ever knowing there had been a battle. They continued their daily lives, unaware that they had just announced to the galaxy that Earth was not available for conquest. In the depths of space, the most powerful military force in galactic history quietly began preparing for the day when these impossible beings might discover they were not alone in the universe. The greatest empire ever known had been reduced to 5 traumatized survivors by a single planet and the creatures who had learned to call it home. The humans had won, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first human attack came at dawn on the 4th day, but the aliens never saw it coming. Jack Morrison had learned something important about warfare in the Amazon. You do not fight the jungle, you become part of it. The attack started with bird calls that sounded completely natural to alien ears, but carried specific messages to human fighters spread throughout the forest. Amy Rodriguez crouched in a tree 50 feet above an alien patrol. She had painted her face with mud and wrapped herself in leaves until she looked like part of the forest itself. Below her, 3 Shardketh warriors moved through the undergrowth, their crystal bodies reflecting the morning light. They thought they were hunting for human settlements, but they were walking into a trap that had taken all night to prepare. The first sign of trouble was a sweet smell in the air. The aliens' sensors detected it but classified it as harmless plant pollen. They were wrong. Maria Santos had taught Amy how to identify trees that released specific chemicals when their bark was cut in certain patterns. The smell was a signal to every insect in the area that there was fresh tree sap available. Within minutes, the clearing was swarming with creatures attracted to the scent. Bees, wasps, hornets, and dozens of other species descended on the area in clouds. The Shardketh tried to activate their energy shields, but the constant environmental damage had left their equipment unreliable. When the shields flickered and failed, the insects found every gap in their crystal armor. One alien warrior fell to his knees, making sounds like breaking glass as hundreds of stings overwhelmed his nervous system. The other 2 tried to retreat, but Amy had planned for that too. She had spent hours the night before weaving tripwires from jungle vines across every escape route. When the panicked aliens tried to run, they crashed through the hidden barriers and fell into pits filled with thorns from plants that injected paralytic toxins. 50 miles away, Tony Blake was conducting his own experiment in biological warfare. He had discovered that certain fungal spores became highly explosive when mixed with the aliens' energy weapon discharges. Working with 2 local guides, he had spent the night spreading these spores along a trail that alien patrols used regularly. When a group of Krathos warriors came marching down the path, their heavy footsteps triggered clouds of nearly invisible spores. The aliens' sensors detected the particles but classified them as harmless organic matter. When one of the warriors test-fired his weapon at a suspicious shadow, the energy beam ignited the spore cloud in a chain reaction that stretched for half a mile. The explosion was not large enough to kill the aliens directly, but it was loud enough to attract every predator in the area. Jaguars came running toward the sound, thinking it might be prey in distress. Anacondas slithered out of the water to investigate. Even the trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches reaching toward the source of the disturbance, the Krathos. Warriors found themselves surrounded by Earth's apex predators, all of them curious about these strange new creatures that had invaded their territory. The aliens had weapons that could destroy buildings, but they had never faced a coordinated attack by creatures that hunted as a team. Lisa Hayes was learning that humans were not the only intelligent species on Earth. She had been watching a family of spider monkeys for 2 days, and she was beginning to understand that they were watching the aliens too. The monkeys had figured out that these strange beings were dangerous, and they were passing that information through their community in ways that human scientists barely understood. When a group of void spawn tried to move through the monkeys' territory, they found the trees full of small, furry creatures that seemed to know exactly where they were going. The monkeys threw things, fruits, branches, even their own waste, with accuracy that would have impressed a professional baseball player. But worse than the throwing was the noise. Spider monkeys can scream loud enough to be heard for miles. When an entire troop decided to express their displeasure with the alien invaders, the sound was overwhelming. The void spawn, already struggling with the constant noise of the jungle, began to break down completely. 2 of them simply dissolved into smoke and disappeared. The third started flying in circles, making static sounds that grew louder and louder until it exploded like a broken radio. Danny Wright was documenting the aliens' technological failures from his hidden observation post. The sophisticated equipment that had conquered 17 star systems was falling apart in Earth's environment. Weapons that had never failed were jamming from exposure to humidity and organic acids. Energy shields designed to stop planet killing. Weapons were being overwhelmed by bacteria too small to see. Their gear is breaking down faster than they can fix it, he reported over the radio. I just watched one of them try to use some kind of scanner, and it started smoking. They threw it away, and it dissolved into green slime when it hit the ground. The aliens were discovering that Earth's microorganisms were unlike anything in their experience. On most planets, bacteria and viruses evolved to attack specific hosts, but Earth's incredible biodiversity had created microbes that could adapt to attack almost anything organic. The aliens' equipment contained organic compounds that Earth's bacteria saw as food, and they were eating the technology from the inside out. Commander Vex Hal was receiving reports that made no sense to him. His warriors were being defeated by creatures that his sensors classified as harmless. Insects that should have been nothing more than minor annoyances were overwhelming soldiers who could survive in molten lava. Plants were somehow coordinating attacks across vast distances. Even the air itself seemed to be fighting them. "How many warriors do we have left?" he asked his science officer. "Fewer than 800, Commander. And the rate of loss is increasing." Increasing? How is that possible? The local ecosystem appears to be learning from our encounters. Tactics that work once do not work again. It is as if the entire planet is adapting to fight us. The science officer was more right than he knew. Maria Santos had taught the human fighters how to read the jungle's communication network, and they were using it to coordinate attacks across hundreds of square miles. When Amy Rodriguez discovered a weakness in alien armor, that information spread through the forest faster than radio signals. Bird calls carried the message from tree to tree. Chemical signals passed through root networks underground. Even the insects were participating in the information exchange. Jack Morrison was beginning to understand something that changed his entire view of the war. The aliens were not just fighting 5 human soldiers, they were fighting the entire Amazon rainforest, and the rainforest was fighting back with 4 billion years of evolutionary experience. They do not understand what they are facing, he told his team during a brief rest. They think in terms of individual predators and prey. But Earth does not work that way. Everything here is connected. When they attack one part of the system, the whole system responds. The humans were not winning because they were stronger or better armed. They were winning because they were part of the system the aliens were trying to destroy. Every plant they knew how to use became a weapon. Every animal behavior they understood became an advantage. Every chemical reaction they could predict became a trap. By the end of the fourth day, the alien invasion force was trapped in an ever-shrinking area, surrounded by a jungle that seemed to hate them personally. Their equipment was failing. Their warriors were dying from causes they could not understand, and their enemy remained invisible. Commander Vexhal made his first distress call to the Empire that night, but the signal was weak and distorted. Unknown to him, certain plants in the area were releasing electromagnetic interference that disrupted communications. The jungle was not just killing his army, it was making sure no one would know what happened to them. The most feared military force in the galaxy was being destroyed by a planet that refused to follow the rules of war. And somewhere in the darkness, 5 human soldiers and their local allies were preparing for the final phase of a battle that the aliens had lost the moment they chose Earth as their target. By the third day, Commander Vexhal was facing something he had never experienced in his long career of conquest: fear. His army of 2,000 elite warriors was now down to less than 1,700, and they had not even seen the planet's dominant species yet. The jungle itself was killing his soldiers faster than any enemy army ever had. He stood in the center of what his troops had tried to make into a fortified camp. Energy barriers hummed around the perimeter, but they were failing more often now. The spores in the air were eating through their technology like acid. The constant noise was driving his void-spawn warriors insane. Even his own Krathos soldiers were showing signs of stress from dealing with creatures they could not understand. "Report," he growled to his science officer. "We have lost over 300 warriors in 3 days, Commander. The casualties are not from combat. They are from environmental factors." "Environmental factors?" Vexhal's voice was dangerous. "Insects, sir. Plants. Fish. Microscopic organisms. This planet's ecosystem appears to be actively hostile to our presence." Vexhal stared at the science officer. He had conquered worlds where the very air was poison. He had fought on planets where the gravity could crush bones. He had led armies through dimension storms that drove most species insane. But he had never faced a world where everything was trying to kill him at once. "What about the dominant species? Have we made contact?" "No, sir. We have detected their presence, but they remain hidden. Our sensors show they are physically weak compared to our warriors, but they appear to be studying us." Jack Morrison was indeed studying them. For 3 days, he and his team had been watching, learning, and planning. They had moved their observation posts 6 times, always staying ahead of alien patrols. Amy Rodriguez had proven to be a master at jungle navigation, leading them through paths that the alien sensors could not detect. But they were not alone anymore. Word of the invasion had somehow reached other humans in the area. Maria Santos, a local guide who worked with environmental research teams, had found them on the second night. She brought knowledge that no military training could provide. "These aliens do not understand the forest," Maria told them in her accented English. "They think like hunters from other places. But the Amazon is not like other places. Here, everything is connected. You hurt one thing, everything else knows about it." She had grown up in these jungles. Her people had lived here for thousands of years, learning the secrets that scientists were only beginning to discover. She knew which plants could heal and which could kill. She knew how to read the forest's moods, how to move without disturbing the delicate balance that kept the ecosystem functioning. "The trees talk to each other," she explained. "Through roots, through chemicals in the air, through electrical signals. We cannot see. When the aliens cut down trees, they sent a message through the whole forest. Now every living thing knows they are enemies." Tony Blake was fascinated by this information. He had been thinking about the forest as a source of materials for improvised weapons. But Maria was describing something much more powerful, a communication network that covered thousands of square miles. "Can we use this network?" he asked. Maria smiled. "My grandfather taught me some of the old ways. Not many people know them anymore, but yes. If you know how to listen, the forest will tell you where your enemies are. If you know how to speak, you can ask the forest for help." Lisa Hayes had been studying the aliens' equipment through binoculars. Their technology was incredibly advanced, but it was designed for sterile environments, clean air, predictable temperatures, simple ecosystems. The chaos of the Amazon was overwhelming their systems. Their shields are failing more often, she reported. Whatever is in the air here is eating through their protective barriers, and their sensors keep giving them false readings because there is too much life interfering with their scans. Danny Wright had been keeping a journal of alien behavior patterns. His farm background had taught him that all animals, no matter how strange, followed certain basic rules. They ate, they slept, they mated, they protected their territory. The aliens were no different. They are getting tired, he told the others. Look at how they move now compared to the first day. They are jumpier, more nervous. They are not sleeping well because the jungle never gets quiet, and they are starting to make mistakes. Amy Rodriguez had noticed something else. They are afraid of the water. I have seen 3 different groups turn back when they reached rivers. I think something happened to one of their scouts. She was right. The aliens had learned to fear Earth's waterways after losing several warriors to creatures they could not identify. Electric eels, piranhas, caimans, water snakes, poisonous frogs, and dozens of other species had turned every stream into a death trap. The aliens' sensors could detect large predators, but they could not distinguish between a harmless fish and one that could kill with a single bite. Jack Morrison was putting together a plan. His team of 5 had become a group of 8, with the addition of Maria and 2 other local guides she had brought with her. They were still vastly outnumbered, but they had advantages the aliens could not match. We are not going to fight them. Head on, he told his expanded team. We are going to use their weaknesses against them. They do not understand this environment, so we turn the environment into our weapon. The plan began that night. Amy Rodriguez and Maria worked together to identify the aliens' patrol routes and guard positions. They moved through the jungle like ghosts, using paths that only the local people knew existed. Every plant, every tree, every animal was a potential ally in their war. Tony Blake had been experimenting with the forest's natural chemistry. Certain tree saps, when mixed with specific plant oils, created compounds that interfered with alien electronics. Other combinations produced gases that were harmless to humans but toxic to several alien species. The jungle was a laboratory full of weapons waiting to be discovered. Lisa Hayes had learned to identify which sounds were natural and which were alien. The jungle's communication network was incredibly complex, but patterns were starting to emerge. Bird calls that meant danger approaching. Insect sounds that indicated the presence of predators. Even the rustling of leaves carried information for those who knew how to interpret it. Danny Wright had made a disturbing discovery while observing alien equipment. Their technology was too advanced for its own good. It relied on perfect conditions and clean environments to function properly. But Earth was anything but clean. Bacteria, viruses, fungi, and countless other microorganisms were constantly trying to break down everything they encountered. The aliens' equipment was not designed to handle biological warfare on a microscopic level. Their guns are starting to malfunction, he reported. I saw one of them try to fire at a tree and nothing happened. The weapon just made a clicking sound. How long before they figure out how to fix them? Jack asked. That is the beautiful part. Danny grinned. They cannot fix them here. The same organisms that are breaking them down will just attack any replacement parts. They would need a completely sterile environment to do repairs, and there is no such thing in the Amazon. Maria had been quiet during these discussions, but now she spoke up. There is something else you should know about the forest. When it decides something is an enemy, it does not just fight back, it remembers. The trees will mark the aliens with chemical signals. Every plant, every animal will know they are dangerous. Even if they leave and come back later, the forest will recognize them. Jack Morrison smiled for the first time since the invasion began. They were not just fighting for their lives anymore. They were defending their home against invaders who had no idea what they had gotten themselves into. The aliens had come to Earth expecting to find another primitive death world to conquer. Instead, They had stumbled into the lair of the most successful predators in the galaxy, beings who had learned to make an entire planet their ally. The hunt was about to begin, and the humans had every advantage except numbers. But in a jungle, where everything was connected, numbers did not matter as much as understanding. And after 3 days of watching, learning, and planning, the humans were ready to show these alien invaders why Earth had never been conquered.